Hello, boys and girls, Buffy the Vampire Slayer fans. I hope you are all doing good. Once again, I return to Sunnydale, and on this video, I will be talking about episode 9 of the second season, and it is What's My Line Part 1. And this is actually the first ever two-part of the series, so that's worth flagging up because certainly this show had a lot of really good two-parters over the years. Some big finales which were two-parters, and just some standout episodes. In fact, sort of coming up quite soon in a few episode time, there's a really big two-parter which I think for many is like the big turning point of the show in just it going to another sort of level. And so I'm excited really because we're approaching the halfway point of this season, and I think the first half of Buffy season 2 is kind of up and down quality wise. You can certainly see an improvement from season 1, and there's a lot of good things in it, but there's also quite a few bad things. But from the midpoint onwards, it really gets into high gear, and you start to see some of the best episodes, some of the best stuff from the show in general. So I'm excited that I'm getting close to that midway point in this season, and for the show. So What's My Line part 1 is also significant because it's the first time we see Marti Noxon appear in the credits as a writer. She co-writes the episode along with Howard Gordon. So they're the writers. It's directed by David Solomon, who I'm pretty sure I've seen his name pop up on other episodes. I think he's probably directed a few, although it doesn't come to my mind what else he's done. And I think he's quite an experienced television director. I could be wrong. He might have done very little apart from this, but someone correct me in the comments or point out what else he's done. But I tend to think I've seen his name more than once anyway on Buffy. So he directs, but obviously, it stands out the fact that this is Marti Noxon's first credit as a writer. And she would go on to be one of the big Buffy writers. I think you kind of get the impression she was very much in the influence of Joss Whedon, very much one of his key sort of I don't know, confidants, if you like to use a pretentious word. But she would go on to write and direct some of the big episodes of the show in years to come, and do some of the best stuff on the series. And of course, later on in season 6, she would be the main showrunner when Whedon was less involved because of other projects. So it's always interesting to see how she started out on the show, and certainly a very solid start. I think you can see from the dialogue and the storytelling in this episode than she really gets a grasp on the world of Buffy and on the characters. You get some really crisp, exciting dialogue in this, some classic smart quips, but also just some very really raw and realistic dialogue, and she just gets a handle on, as I said, the world of Buffy, the characters, and kind of how to build it and how to make it quite relatable. This episode, and these two episodes really, along with part 2, really does a good job of building the mythology of the series. So pretty big couple of episodes, this two-parter. Of course, with the next part following on, this is really a setup episode. So the basic plot is then the What's My Line side of the week, referencing like the classic game show in the States, is then it is career week at Sunnydale High, and that means the students have to fill out like these sort of questionnaire forms, which we see the Scoobies do at the start of the episode, and it's meant to indicate what sort of career they potentially could go on to later on once they've left high school. And so there's kind of this theme in the episode about thinking about their futures and kind of growing up, and it's particularly pressing for Buffy because she kind of has this like kind of nonchalant like attitude. She's like, well, what's the point? Because of my restrictions, because of my role as a Slayer, then what's the point in thinking about the future and thinking about a potential career? And this is another side to what we've seen before, a similar theme where she's obviously been concerned about having a normal teenage girl life where she's wanted to date boys, sometimes threatening then that's going to be at the expense of her slaying duties, and also just certain other stuff that she's tried to balance like a regular teenage life with what she does as the Slayer. So this is an extension of that, and in that I think it's sort of good character growth because it actually shows them Buffy does daydream about other stuff, about the future, about actually having a career beyond just being her duties as a Slayer. So it does show good character growth for Buffy, and at the same time I think it kind of adds like an extra sort of layer to her relationship with Angel in this episode, because I think, I don't know, in an indirect sort of way, I think she worries about the future and obviously thinks about kind of her future with Angel, and there's some really great stuff in this episode with Buffy and Angel. I actually love the fact that, first of all, he knows about Career Week because he says he lurks around the school, which is a funny little touch, but he's there for Buffy and is listening and supporting her, and we kind of see actually again this idea of him sort of, although it's obviously a romantic relationship, him kind of having this father figure type. Well, that's more Giles, but I guess just him as literally the older, more mature of the two, actually like listening and giving his wisdom to her. But yeah, there's some great lines in that scene where Buffy says, "You're like the one freaky thing that makes freaky sense in this world." And she kind of says, I think she says at one point, "Oh yeah, I wish we could just be like regular like teenage lovers," or something along that line. So it all builds like the relationship with Angel and where Buffy's like headspace is. But obviously, like apart from that, the main plot of the episode is then Spike is desperately trying to get this manuscript read, and the manuscript is supposed to hold like the cure for Drusilla and to bring her back to full strength. And he's trying to get like this kind of dorky sort of like vamp to try and decode it, and it's not quite working out at the start of the episode. There's some like funny thing he comes out with where it's something like a base of beef canoes or something like that, when he gets like a smack from Spike, and quite rightly. So what basically happens is then Drusilla works out then, because she's got like these cards, like these, like magical type cards that she can read, sort of thing. Magical's probably not the right word, but tells the fortune with them. And she figures out then there's a key that they can use, to to unlock the mystery sort of thing, and that it's in the tomb, and so Spike sends a bunch of his like guys to get the it's some sort of symbol. Was it a ring or no, I can't remember. No, some sort of cross symbol. They're very sort of religious in this episode, like the symbol and the sort of some of the like the references. But yeah, they go and get it, the object, and yeah, they so they're in the process of like kind of getting ready for like this ceremony and trying to dissect that and kind of work out just how to restore Drew's like powers. And at the same time, Spike, in order to try and like keep Buffy at bay and to just keep her busy, I guess, while they're working out how to restore Drew's powers. He calls in the Order of Taraka, which is very interesting. And then, of course, there's a certain other character that debuts in this episode. And I mean, I'm in full spoilers if you've seen it, but it's Kendra, the Vampire Slayer, with that absolutely batshit crazy accent. What was that all about? I'll talk more about her, I mean, later, but I guess that accent is just, well, it's one of those things you either go with it or you don't. You either think, oh, this is so silly, I just can't take her seriously, or you just go with it and just enjoy it for the goofy fun. And I think I'm kind of there with Kendra. She's sort of a guilty pleasure type character. I think the actress is fine. She does a pretty good job, and I sort of quite like the character in itself. It's just obviously that accent is so weird, and the way she dresses as well. I'm pretty sure at one point in the next episode, like Xander says, she's like dresses like a Power Ranger, which isn't far off, to be fair, but some freaky outfit. But yeah, she's pretty good fun, and I like what they do with the character and this other Slayer and the stuff with her and Buffy. But I'll talk more about that. But it's a really good, solid episode. It's a good setup episode for the second part. I mean, just talking about the Spike and Drusilla stuff, what I really like about that is then it really introduces stakes. It really introduces or kind of ups like the threat of like Spike and Drusilla. The fact then that the whole thing is to try and like restore her powers. It kind of adds this idea that she is a big deal, because you've already got Spike, who is obviously at full powers. He's already kind of been shown to be this really dangerous, deadly opponent for Buffy, and so the fact that you could have Drusilla also at full powers, I think it's just really sold, and that could be like something a real threat. So I like the fact that this whole plot is really to get Drew to full strength, and that could really be a big like tipping point for Spike's side, essentially. And what's great as well, which I think shows what an important part Giles plays on the show, and what a good like actor Anthony Stewart Head is, and the weight he gives some of his lines is. Then a couple of times in this episode, he is like kind of assigned to kind of sum up the plot in a way and explain what's happening to Buffy and the Scoobies. But at the same time, he has to do it in a very like dramatic way, which really sells the threat and says, yeah, this is a big deal. The stakes are high here, and he just does it brilliantly. You know, there's a scene when him and Buffy go to like the tomb, where they've obviously taken this big cross, and he sees like the broken seal of Taraka, or Danoka, or however you say it, and he explains the whole thing to Buffy, and just his expression and just how concerned he looks and how kind of just stunned he is as he's telling Buffy this stuff. I think hats off to Anthony Stewart Head. He does an amazing job of just making this information clear, but also really, really giving it some oomph, really, really selling it. Because if you don't think this stuff is important, if you don't think these guys, these demons are threats, and this potential like giving Drew power is big stuff, then the episode sort of falls down, and it wouldn't be such a good lead into the second episode. Because there's another scene later on, which is a good example, where Sanders kind of been quipping all the time, and when Giles says about the Order of Taraka, he kind of makes this quip about, didn't we beat them or something in like the ice hockey game or something, and he makes a follow-up gag, and Giles was like, that's enough, Xander. And again, it's really brilliant, because a lot of times Xander will just quip and Giles won't really respond, apart from just being quite sarcastic maybe once in a while, but here, because he says, no, this is a serious deal, it's not the time to make jokes. So again, that serious tone, the fact that he like kind of cuts Xander off and is really blunt with him, kind of gets that across. And I really love the whole fallout, because it literally freaks Buffy out. Like she goes off and she's really like scared and afraid, and just sort of paranoid. There's just simple things, like at one point, I mean, we see Oz in this episode, which I'll talk about, but she like runs into him in the hall, and I mean, actually, the stuff when she's walking down the hall is kind of a bit silly, because she's just, I think things are just appearing to her as sinister, just like really basic stuff. So like when like this guy walks past and combs his hair. But yeah, she freaks out and grabs poor Oz by the throat, because she's just like really paranoid. And another good sort of touch is later, like she's wandering the neighbourhood, and again, Sarah Michelle Gellar does a great job in her body language in just selling all this. And at one point, she looks at her house. She's just like outside their house, and it's really great, because it's just a simple little detail. Then she's worried about the threat of this Order of Taraka, and she's just thinking, well, might they go after my home, my mum? And I kind of like then she doesn't go inside. She actually goes off, and she goes to like Angel's place. He's not there, but she goes and lays on his bed for a while. Again, another nice little touch. But yeah, the whole thing is really well sold. We get some great Spike and Drew stuff in this episode. Like Spike is just like really angst-ridden. He's obviously like worried about getting Drew back to full power, and getting frustrated with like the nerdy vamp who's meant to be like translating it and not doing the best job. I think Drew having the cards as well is just a wonderful touch. It's like a great character beat for her, because at one point when the first like demon, the first member of the Taraka has been killed, she turns over the card like so the bottom is facing up, because it's like that's the first one down. But yeah, Spike's great, Drew's great. I love them kind of dancing, and Spike's like, yeah, we dance on the Slayers. grave. And that's before it cuts to the title, and the nerdy vamp is just like, who are these guys? What have I gotten myself into? So the whole plot, the way it's sold, is really effective. Because the Order of Taraka, they're interesting because we've had similar things before in the show, like in season 1 in Never Kill a Boy on the First Date. There was like this group of vampires that the Master sent, like I think they were just called the Three. So it feels like kind of well worn territory, but I think what I like, first of all, they are sold properly as a threat in the episode, because obviously the audience knows realistically then these are just kind of like middle ground, in between type vamps. They're probably not going to stick around beyond like these episodes, but they're sold as a proper threat. Also, I think I quite like them. They're quite distinct from each other. They sort of stand out like personality wise. One of them's like this really rough looking like biker type. Look, he's the one that gets killed first. He's the one who attacks like Angel and Buffy when they're ice skating, and he gets killed first of all. And then you've got the bug guy, who is just brilliant. Another really good character actor. I've seen that guy pop up in quite a few things, but he's like, I mean, his whole thing is like bugs, but the cover is that he's a door-to-door salesman, like selling cosmetics. And there's this running gag where he like entices women to let him in by saying you can try free samples. They're like, oh, free, and we see that. And actually, I do think then the bug effect that we see in this episode is pretty solid. I think I've heard some people say they don't think it's that good, but for the time, and considering at this point in the show they didn't have too much of a budget, I think the bug effect we see is actually pretty good. But I do like him. I do like the actor, and it sort of plays into one of the big metaphors of Buffy, the fact that you've got it's set in this middle class suburban type area, and it's all about the darkness lurking underneath the kind of facade, if you like. So I sort of like that he has like this clean cut sort of Bible salesman type look to him, and underneath he's like the Bugman. So they have it. So I enjoyed his part. So I do like then they're given distinct sort of characters in a way, and things to do. Now the third part of the Order actually isn't revealed in this episode, but this is a really well handled thing, because they tease then it's going to be Kendra, because they sort of show them all arriving. We see the bug guy arriving, we see the biker dude looking one arriving, and then we see like in the back of this like aeroplane this pilot walks in and sees someone, says, hey, you shouldn't be there, and he gets knocked on his ass. And it's Kendra. That's the first time we see her. So whenever we see her in this episode, it's teased that she's going to be like the third member of the Order of Taraka. She attacks Angel and locks him up in the cage. That's at Willie's. And talk a bit about Willie, because this is his debut. The Willie character, who's basically known as Willie the Snitch, has a few appearances throughout the show. I forget the actor's name actually. It's I'll have to get it next time. It's like Silvio something or other, I think. But I've seen him pop up in a few things. I know him best for Becca, the 90s sitcom with Ted Danson. He played one of the main roles in that. He's very entertaining, kind of sleazy, but sort of bumbling and quite has a certain charm to him. Those sorts of characters, and that's kind of the Willy thing. But yeah, really enjoyable character, and I think this is a good example of them building the mythology of the Buffyverse, because essentially Willy runs like a bar, and it's like a demon bar, so it's where they go and hang out, but it's also, he has kind of like information on demons, so he can be like a source of information as well. So I do like that, because there's a logic to it. It makes sense. Then you, like, demons running throughout Sunnydale would have their own bar, their own place to hang out. And it also opens up this great possibility, the fact that Buffy and others can potentially use Willy as like a source to get information. So it's the first time we see Willy, and Angel comes in and he's really aggressive because he wants him to tell him about the Order of Taraka and who sent them, basically. And he kind of goes all Angelus mode in the scene, because I think because Willy's a human and seemingly innocent, although he's obviously a bit murky, but probably doesn't quite deserve what Angel gives to him. So he almost goes full blown sort of evil Angel, the way he sort of tries to torture information out of Willy. And that's when Kendra shows up, and she's previously seen Angel and Buffy kissing at the ice skating, at the ice rink. So she really goes after Angel and knocks him in the cage, like locks him up. And that's a potential threat, because I mean it's there's sort of sunlight appearing in the room, and gradually it's going to get closer to Angel is the whole idea. So they do this nice sort of like swerve with Kendra, where they set her up to be like the Third Order of Taraka, and it's revealed at the very end then she is indeed another vampire slayer. Buffy, she tracks down Buffy at Angel's. They get into a big fight, and it's just a brilliant sort of like reaction type scene where we hear the accent for the first time, because I know she talked with Angel, but there's some funny lines like the way she says chick fight, and so we get this fight, and then she's like, who are you? And Buffy's like, something like, who am I? Who the hell are you? And she's like, I'm Kendra, the vampires. And I just love Buffy's reaction. She almost does a literal double take, like shakes her head, and it's like, what the fuck is going on? And cut to continue. It's a brilliant ending. I just love the sort of mirror, face off of the whole thing, and Buffy's double take when she says, and of course watching at the time, what a brilliant reveal, and it has you hooked for the next episode. So there's some really great stuff in this episode. It's very enjoyable. I do like the stuff with the Scoobies at the school, and the just them thinking about their careers and maybe having a future. Of course, Willow meets Oz for the first time properly, because they've both been selected for this program at the FBI, and they're like the only two Sunnydale students to be selected. So they've done a really good job of like building up to their first meeting, and even when they meet in this episode, it's like only one line, because like Spike's just like, not Spike, was I saying Spike? Oz has been like looking at like this canapé which the FBI offered them, and he's like, canapé? And that's like the one line. So we're slowly get a bit more of Oz, but it's sort of a slow type thing, which is really good. Obviously, him and Willow are going to have a pretty major relationship. I think one of my best lines is actually like the interaction with Snyder and Xander at one point when he's looking for Buffy, and first of all Xander's line about something he said something like I would love to stand in your shoes. I mean, not your literal shoes, because you are a small person. And then he tries to backtrack, and Snyder just cuts him to shreds. He kind of like just runs him down completely. He says, "It means nothing, Harris. Whatever comes out of your mouth is like a complete waste of breath. An airborne toxic event." And I love Xander's like little pause, and then he comes back in with, "Well, I'm glad you can be so honest with me, and I hope that one day in the future I will be in a position to be as honest as you." And Snyder's just like, "Fascinating," and walks off. But it's a great exchange, and I think what I really like about it, with that response from Xander, first of all, he actually gets the better of it with his put down in response, because all Snyder can say is "fascinating" and just walk off. But also, it's kind of it fits in with like the theme of the episode about them thinking about their careers and the future and stuff, because obviously Snyder's like this like not parental, but this adult figure in authority, and he abuses his power all the time. He uses it to try and run down like the students and people in less fortunate positions, or without as much power anyway, as in when it comes to school. So I think Xander kind of saying, "One day I hope to be in the position to be that honest with you," is just this kind of little dig, and it's kind of saying you're basically using your power and abusing it, being an asshole. And it's kind of a shot back, but him also saying, "Yeah, I just hope one day things come around and I can use my power and really run you down," basically. So it fits in with the theme of the episode about looking at the future, and about how sometimes it is about power, people being fortunate enough, and obviously not abusing your power. So I really like that exchange. I like the touch of Buffy not wanting to be in like law enforcement when apparently her results from the test comes out, then she could be in law enforcement potentially. And of course Xander's hilariously like prison parole, prison guard basically is his. And we sort of see in some ways the start of Xander really, even with the Scoobies, with Buffy and Willow sort of being like the butt of the joke sometimes, which is sort of interesting. And actually another touch I like, because at the end of the episode, Xander and Cordelia are sent to Buffy's house to see if she's there, basically because they're worried about her. She's gone off and they can't find her. And actually, because Cordy's like being really snarky about getting up and having to do this, and then Xander makes comments about, "Come on, if you want to be a member of the Scooby Gang." So pretty cool touch. He actually like mentions Scooby Gang, and the idea that then Cordy is actually on her way to becoming a fully fledged member. And let's face it, who wouldn't want to be a fully fledged member of the Scooby Gang? I've rambled enough about this episode, but there you have it. That's my review of What's My Line Part 1. I will return soon with What's My Line Part 2, but all that's left for me to do is to rate the episode, and I'm going to give it a strong 7.5 out of 10. I was tempted to give it an 8, but it is, as I said, like a setup episode, and it's a solid, strong setup episode. But I think certainly overall I would probably give, if I was rating the episode as a whole, like both parts, I would probably give it like an 8 out of 10. But because this is just a setup episode, I sort of can't go too high, but a good 7.5 I'm going to give it. And so when it comes to the big list, my ranking of every Buffy episode, it's going to go in pretty high. I think this is, for the standard at the moment, this is one of the strongest episodes so far. And I'm just looking at the list now, it's going to go in at number 5, I think, just under Lie to Me. So, and just above The Puppet Show. No, sorry, When She Was Bad. When She Was Bad, number 6. And What's My Line Part 1 goes in at number 5. And from what I can remember, What's My Line Part 2 is even better, so that should go higher on the list. But there you have it. That's my review of the first part of this 2-parter, and I'll be back soon with What's My Line Part 2. See you guys again soon. Goodbye.